and welcome to Need to Know Westford. I'm Beth Morrison. I'm a social worker and a member of FinCom in Westford.
I'm Kathy Ricketson, and I'm also a social worker and a town volunteer and a volunteer here at WestfordCAT. So welcome to Need to Know. And today our guests are Marilyn Frank and Noelle Donovan of our Conservation Commission. So today we're going to learn all that we need to know about the Conservation Commission and the important work that it does here in town.
So our first question is just tell us a bit about the history and the mission of CONSCOM.
Well, the Conservation Commission is a town body that's responsible for protecting the natural resources in Westford. It's also responsible for administrating the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and its own wetlands bylaw. And if you were building a house or if you were building an office building and you had found out from the plans that you have any areas that would come under our jurisdiction, you would come before us to get permits to do what you needed to do and directions for what you need to do.
Fascinating.
And what year was the beginning of the committee?
That I'm not sure. Noelle, do you know?
I do not know.
I'm on it 24 years, and it was here long before me, so if I were to make a guess, I'd say at least 40 years. But I don't know for sure.
How many members does it have, the committee?
We have seven members on our
Okay.
committee.
And each member has a term?
Yes,
And
we have a 3-year term.
Okay. So can you tell us, Noelle, a little bit about the process? How do you volunteer for this committee? What is the process?
That's a great question. There's an application on the Westford, Massachusetts website, and you fill out the application. It is reviewed by the Conservation Commission. They do an interview, and they make a recommendation to the select board, and the select board appoints the members.
So what drew you to this work?
There is a parcel in Nabnasset, we call it the Edwards Woods, and I noticed my entire life there's been a dumping ground at the end of Hemlock. And one day I was walking by there and I noticed that heavy machinery had pushed all of the yard waste further into the wetland. And so there was a sign there that said, please, police take notice. So I called the Westford police and they informed me that don't worry about it. It's all going to break down. It's natural. And I reached out to the Conservation Commission, but we were deep in COVID at that time. Doing some digging on the Westford website, I found Bill Harmon's name, reached out to him, and he got back to me right away. And he said, there's an opening on the Conservation Commission. I really think that you would be a good fit for that. And so I applied, and I am now on my 4th year. I was officially resigned last night.
For a good reason.
For a good reason, yeah, because now I'm on the select board. And funny enough, the select board had to vote to resign me.
Okay, because the appointments go through the select board?
Yes.
Okay. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And what drew you to the Conservation Commission?
Well, first of all, I grew up in the Bronx, New York. And when I moved to town, there were all 7,000 people here. I'm here 56 years. And I always told my parents that I had the right parents in the wrong place. So I have always loved the country. I've always felt that, I just somehow got mixed up in the world and I belonged here all along. And I've stayed here, as I said, for 56 years. I milk cows for George Fletcher. So I see all the changes that are happening. I know that we need them. And I know that a lot of them are really, really good. I still need country. I still need it to represent the things that I strived for all my life. And I have no intention of moving. I'm 90 now. So this will be it. And it has never disappointed me.
I just have to admit to everyone here that I really want to be Marilyn when I grow up, because she's just my role model for town model citizen. You were also a teacher for many years
yes.
in the Westford Public Schools.
27.
27.
And left only because my husband bought a bagel business, so that I helped out in the business and I left the teaching. But I loved that. I also was in charge of their health ed and brought in sex education and drug abuse and drug education and CPR during a 6-year period while I was a first grade or second grade teacher. That's all I ever taught, K-1, 2.
Hey.
Loved that. Brought in multi-age, which I loved even more when I had your children for 2 years. Was the union president, so I did a lot even then.
So you just set out to make sure that the environment that you loved so much would be protected.
I can't remember. I was trying to think of where it was that I was disturbed about something. And I went to meetings and I spoke out. And Eric Foley asked me if I might be interested in coming aboard. And I did.
Wow. And the rest is history.
That's right.
I think it's interesting for both of you. You had someone point out, like, why don't you join this committee? And, I think we all need people in our lives to do that, to see things in us that maybe we don't see, and a way that we could contribute to our communities and, kind of encourage us to get involved. So it sounds like that happened for both of you.
You're absolutely right, including education,
So what are some of the accomplishments of the committee?
We have over 75 miles of trails that the commission oversees and protects. We enforce the Wetlands Protection Act, which protects any land within 100 feet of a bordering vegetative wetland.
We have over 21,000 acres of land in our care. That office is manned by, I don't know, what is it? No, 4 people?
4 people, yeah.
Conservation Commission, which would be upstairs with building. But Matt Salem and Sierra and the people who work in that office,
They really make sure that we're
incredible.
following all the rules
To
and
the
regulations.
best of anyone's possible imagination. I made a note here. You would find it if you would to look in the book that comes out each year and talks about each department. But we have 67 permanent conservation restrictions in Westford, and that is on over 1,700 acres of land.
Wow.
So yes, we need homes. Yes, we need people to have places to come to, but we need a balance. And this committee, which is so minuscule, has done a phenomenal job through the years, which is why I've always wanted to stay on.
So many town committees punch above their weight, as they say, because you can have the best environmental laws in the world, but if you don't have compliance and you don't have enforcement and local people with their eyes on their own community, it's hard to make those wonderful laws real for all the rest of us. I wanted to ask if you have any important current projects under consideration.
Well, I think we have the big one coming eventually on 110 with the housing that we're going to be.
The Powers Road project. So we did a site visit, 37 Powers Road, and there's multiple wetland areas on that property. And we're in charge of protecting 100 feet. So we, they want to have access to the water for, kids to play and, So we need to make sure that there's a buffer zone there and that it is protected because we can't have eyes on it all the time. So they're coming before us with their plans. And I think
And they have to meet
And do you
all the
go
requirements.
and do you go out to the site?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't always go with them, but they go.
And have you done that, Noel?
We did do a site walk.
Okay.
Yes.
So I moved to town right as the Walmart controversy
yes.
was at its peak. And very first town meeting I ever went to was the Walmart meeting. And I was like, I think there were 5,000 people in the gym at Westford Academy and television cameras and all kinds of things. And I thought, this is the town for
And
me.
buttons. Do you remember buttons?
Everything. And what prevented Walmart from coming to Westford? Was it the wetlands?
I don't remember that.
I thought it
strongly.
was because there was a
It certainly might have been.
salamander.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
But it certainly might have been the last blow, so to speak. If they had proven that they had areas that they couldn't develop. I know that was a hard piece to develop anyway. It took over 2 years, I think, to develop that piece of property.
I do remember the wetlands coming up behind the woods, what were the woods at that time, and that there were species of wildlife there that needed protection. Walmart said they could do it, but they really didn't know what they were doing. And I do remember the environmental groups commenting and all the work that the committees had done.
Well, we have to walk the property. We have to make sure that things are the way they need to be. But they didn't want Walmart either.
Right, but
So that
from a
brought
big
out
proposal like that to the smallest proposal in your own neighborhood or even on your own street, there was a controversy on my street about whether the last lot on the street was buildable because it was wet. And I know the Conservation Commission had to come out not once, but several times as it changed hands with different developers.
Now, picture how many people work in that office. And those are the same people who come out over and over. I'll tell you how much I admire.
And the pressure's
what they
tremendous. The stakes are very high for these developers. I was very impressed with the integrity and the empathy that was given to the developers of the project, because they've invested a lot of money and they're hoping to complete a certain number of homes, but yet they had a lot that wouldn't perk. So they had to be called out more than once through like 3 or 4 developers.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And we were wondering, how do you work with the other committees in towns? How do you interact with them?
We haven't had too much where we had to be, we might have an opinion from them, but I haven't sat on another board,
No, there's not too much. I mean, people that come before us, they also go to the planning board.
Right,
They go to
right.
different
So-
boards.
Right. So they could
For
come
their
to our
projects.
meeting,
Yes.
but it's not like we're having a combined meeting.
But
that
does
I
the
haven't-
select board call you in sometimes?
No.
I think there was a few times
it
when
could
I
have
was
happened.
on FinCom where the town had a right of refusal
That's different.
and the town could purchase the property like for open space or conservation. I don't know.
Then there might have been an interaction, but it might have happened with someone, let's say, who's in charge, like Matt Salem. It doesn't mean that groups can't come before us, but I don't really think that they do very often. So I think that gets handled maybe from leader to leader, somebody
Okay.
in charge of FinCom, somebody in charge of Conscom.
When we're going to purchase East Boston camps, was Conscom involved? And
That was the very beginning.
like when we're going to purchase a huge plot of land or, keep it.
That was
From
a
being
huge
developed.
project.
Yeah, what I remember about that is that the land that East Boston Camps has protected, it's protected not only with the Conscom, but it's also protected by the conservation restriction. The people, I don't know the name of that group, but it's Andrea Purana Sweet, and
Ellen
it's
Hardy.
a town.
They
moderator.
created an entity
So they
to
it's
protect
Ellen
it.
Hardy. So
Yes.
there's a separate group. I wouldn't call them the watchdogs.
No.
Of the conservation, but
protect the
they are.
restriction.
In other words, if there's something we want to do in Conscom, like the road going in, they need to be notified. We can't just do it. So there's more than one eye on the property, making sure that it's okay. In
So
that
in
instance,
that case, you have
so
citizen advisory.
so we have that there. But that's the one that comes to my mind. There may be others.
And then that was like CPA funding was used, I think, also to purchase it.
Yes,
think so.
absolutely. Now,
Now,
Mal, you have to explain.
I was involved with the group, and so were many, many other people when we wanted to have the town accept CPA and be able to.
Which
do
is
the
Community
database.
Preservation Act.
Thank you. And those community preservation funds. And so that not only do we pay regular taxes, but those people who participate in that pay a tax.
So when you purchase a home, a certain amount of the purchase is reserved in a tax for community preservation. right?
Correct. But you can opt out of that if you fiscally cannot afford that. There are people who don't pay the CPA tax. They do that through the taxpayer's office. But that group, and the same, it's interesting, a lot of the same people have been involved in the same things throughout town. But those people who called that special meeting and got the town involved around that were able to get the votes so that the money could be spent that way.
Oh, yeah, that was a huge effort. You saw citizens mobilizing to get ready when they knew the Hyams
It was like
Foundation
a-
would be turning it over
Yeah.
and wanted to turn it over to the... So there have been quite a number of properties that could have either been 250 houses.
Oh my God.
Or
Yeah.
it could have
Right.
been
Right.
open space for
Right.
the town.
Yeah. So I was involved in that. And then the seat that I hold on CPA, which I've also been on for 24 years, that seat comes from conservation.
Okay,
And
so are
because
you
I had
the
been-
liaison?
So in a sense, I am, but I hold, that. And I happen to be the vice chair of CPA at the current time.
And I've seen you get up at town meeting and offer the opinion of the community for community
Right. And
preservation.
to answer questions. Usually it's Tootie Healy.
Yes.
This year it was me.
So they work hand in hand often,
Yes.
PA and...
But that's where that seat comes from. In other words, when I stop doing it, someone else will be appointed from the committee.
So the CPA provides the funding to purchase
Could.
open land.
Yes.
Potentially,
Yes.
if
It's
it's supported by town meeting.
That is correct.
But
it's one of the places that you can spend the money on.
Because it's considered conservation, right? So the CPA, you can spend money on recreation, conservation, and historical preservation.
Yes.
So I think that committee really does go hand in hand with ConsCom a lot of times. And I'm wondering if you could also use like CPA money to develop trails or to improve properties that are owned.
If somebody comes with a proposition like that and it falls within the guidelines, the answer is yes. And I would say the answer is yes. For instance, we had something recently, which was the turf that was discussed.
Yes.
And that is not acceptable for CPA funds. There was a lawsuit in a town, which then made it so it could not happen again. So that if this town wanted to remove the artificial turf because they were going to put in a real field, that would be allowed.
Because it's natural.
It would be allowed to spend the money also to remove the turf. If they removed the turf and the town was going to put another turf field there, it would not be okay to get that money.
Through CPA.
That's correct.
Yes, I know that was. And another committee for that was the Recreation Department, right? The Recreation Committee was also giving recommendations and ultimately brought the recommendation at town meeting.
Yeah, that was
so there's a lot of interplay with a lot of different committees.
And a lot of people felt the same way. A lot of people did a lot of homework, but a lot of people felt the same way. As I remember, that room was packed.
Well, I learned a lot. My children have been out of the, sports programs for many years. And I learned a lot at that town meeting about, what was the advantage of a natural field? What was the advantage of the synthetic field in New England where we have long winters, and what would be the amount of time that the field could be used? Because your reaction might just be, well, why not just, have natural grass? How did this come up? Because it's expensive to have a synthetic surface. And I learned a lot. And it was a very complicated issue. It wasn't
including health and safety.
And I think it shows a lot of committees in the background have been thinking about this and talking about it for all year long, probably before you get to town meeting. So if you want to have an impact in your community, being a part of these committees, it's a way to really have a big impact.
Absolutely. To influence an important vote. I always wait when I'm sitting at town meeting for the appropriate committee to come up and make a statement and explain things, because I know all the work that goes into that and all the time that goes into it. What do you think was your most challenging project? Well, you've been here, Noelle.
Mine is where Walmart was. I don't know if we've had anything that contentious. That was the most contentious thing I sat on.
Not in the past 4 years.
Well, Westford developed the apartments down on 110, but right now you have a big thing, which is the MBT overlay
Powers
project.
Road.
Yeah. But we haven't had anything to discuss with it yet.
Until Powers Road.
Right.
Now, can you, Noelle, explain about the MBTA overlay? Powers Road would be considered the first project of that initiative. And what is that initiative for?
That is to provide more affordable housing in town, in our overlay district.
And the overlay district is because we are connected to transit.
Yes. So 110, the bus system that goes through 110 is connected in Lowell and I believe also in Littleton. So it puts us in the corridor for the MBTA.
And the corridor is the buses along 110 and then the train in Littleton.
In Lowell.
So then it's mandated. It's not, we don't have a
state
choice.
mandate.
Right.
It's a mandate.
State mandate. The town has no choice.
But this is the first piece of property that's come up with a proposal to do this.
As part of that.
But this is far in the future, too. They're just in the beginning stages. They're doing, they did the wetlands flagging to figure out where the wetlands were.
One of the things that I'm very interested in is Westford's environmental picture. We went from a mill town to more of a suburban environment once we were all apple orchards and farms. And it seems like we've done a decent job protecting our natural environment. But right now, down where the old mills are, there's a lot of environmental concerns, right? Should that property be developed, there would have to be remediation.
You're talking about 12 North Main Street?
Yes.
Yeah.
12 North Main Street.
That came before the select board last night, and they asked what our ideas were, whether we wanted to completely demolish the building, completely renovate the building, do a combination of both, what we would like to see there. The suggestion from the select board last night was a combination. So we really love saving the bell tower. It's an iconic part of that part of town. And the building right next to the dam could have potential to upset the dam. And it has a lot of historical value with the machinery that's in there. So saving that was very important. And also doing a mixed use of residential and commercial and open space in that area, potentially having a walkway down to the river for folks in the neighborhood to be able to enjoy that space. Because right now you can't get to that part of the water. And we talked about having, a coffee shop in that part of town. There's really nothing available in that part of town anymore since Spinners is gone. And our Parents Market?
It's
Parents Market. Yeah, Spinners.
Yeah,
Yes,
wow.
it was a different one. So we're looking to have, some housing, commercial, and open space in that area.
While preserving the bell
While
tower
preserving
and
the bell
protecting the dam.
Yes.
So here's where having a CONSCOM member on our select board was a very good thing.
I think
Because
so.
you understand the considerations for the environment right around it. I remember the development of the Abbott Mill apartments, and they did a beautiful job, in my opinion. They're very pretty. They kept the look and feel of the buildings, and then also some of the beautiful pieces of machinery are on display around the residential area. And I think that's so interesting to preserve Westford's history and show the children what was here before. So in that spirit, hopefully this can be developed in the same way. But there would be a lot of environmental considerations, right? Because that was an industrial site.
There's a lot of cleanup to happen beforehand. Yeah.
And how does that get handled?
But we have received some federal money from ARPA and I'm not sure if it was from the infrastructure bill or from ARPA, but we did receive several grants in the last 4 years.
Have they been saved or they've been used?
So I'm not sure how, if they've already been used, spent, to you probably know from
Yes.
Select board.
We're in the process of getting more grant money to help with the cleanup. And
that would be great.
Yeah. And a lot of it, we can't get into a lot of that building because for safety reasons. So we need more money to be able to assess the building to see what we can save beyond the bell tower and that other building next to the dam. So we will see.
Well, I know on the warrant, it did come up that money was needed to assess that situation.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because the dam is fragile. And that came up at the last town meeting. So really, our two big areas of development are the 110 overlay district, in the coming years. And then Route 40 has been seeing more development down here where WestfordCAT is housed. And what do you see along the Route 40 corridor these days on COMSCOM? Have any projects come up
I
there?
don't think that I've seen anything practically. And I see the size of the housing and what they're doing. I don't remember anybody coming.
Well, because the lakes are there,
Maybe they will eventually, but I haven't.
We did have one family come before us that moved into one of the new homes over on
Was it over
Dianato
there?
Drive. What happened was the builder clear cut right up to the 100-foot buffer zone so that they wouldn't have to come for whatever reasons. And there were 100-foot pine trees within 10 feet from this house that was built. So they came before us saying, this is not safe. Cut down these trees. I do think that there needs to be a little bit more collaboration with building and conservation so that it's instances like that don't happen where a new homeowner has to then
Face a different problem.
go through all of that process, put in a public notice to get those trees cut down.
Oh, very interesting. So when a resident in town has an issue right around their own property or in their own neighborhood, who would they go to first? Would they go to the office at town hall?
They would contact Matt Salem.
Right.
Matt
They'd see him,
Salem.
they'd see him first.
Okay.
And he's great. He would walk them through the process.
Because developers go before the planning board. They work with Jeff Morissette and land use.
They have no choice.
Right. They have to.
But if someone hadn't bought something yet and had those kind of questions, it would be appropriate to come to the office and ask and not find out after the fact. I think they found out after the fact.
Right. My street abutted woods that intersect with the Tom Trail, I call it. There are old abandoned cars in the woods. I do remember calling to town hall many years ago to say, is that okay that these things are out there in the woods? Or are they an environmental concern? And they said they were so knowledgeable. They knew where everything was. Everything had been inspected. It was a natural process. Hazardous materials were removed from all of these sites, and they were just decomposing in a way that was perfectly safe and were kind of features of the trail, you know. And I was very impressed. I was very impressed at how they knew everything that was out there. So then you feel like there are real stewards in our town.
Right. And the Westford Conservation Trust is a big part of that, too.
Tell us a little bit about that.
They're a volunteer group in town, and they help us maintain the trails. So they do a lot of the legwork, walking the trails and clearing the trails of any fallen debris or any potential fallen debris.
And they'd notify if they discovered something.
Yep.
That is fantastic work.
And they've been as long as I can remember. Been there.
And I think they do trail walks every Tuesday,
They do,
right?
They do the trail walks.
And I think maybe some town cleanup projects too, didn't they? Organize?
I don't remember that.
They've done town cleanup projects, definitely.
Picking
along
up
the
trash
lakefront.
yeah.
Down at the lakes and the little beaches like Edwards Beach. I remember doing that with my kids. So there's just a lot. I know when I'm out on the trails, I always appreciate not only the people that work on the trails, but also how many Boy Scout and Girl Scout projects are along the trails. And I mentioned to Noelle that during COVID, I walked the Peace Trail next to the Drew Farm building, a farmhouse, for the first time. And you told me about your brother.
Yep, he did his Eagle Scout project. It was a footbridge right at the beginning of the Peace Trail at the end of Drawbridge, I believe it is.
Yes, because there's a lot of wetlands there.
Mhm.
And you have to walk on the wooden walkway.
Yeah, we have a lot of scouts that come before us for their Eagle projects. And they have built so many footbridges for us. The lookout over at Grassy Pond was an Eagle Scout project.
Yeah.
It was great. Allows access to...
And they redo them, some that have been run down.
Yes, they've built benches for along the way where you can sit down. And really nicely placed at vista points and lookout points. So I love the cooperation of all of these groups just to make it a great experience for our residents. Well, tell us anything else that we need to know about ConsCom. If you were talking to a potential volunteer, what would you tell them?
I guess I'd ask them what their interests were first. What drew them to us? How could we help fulfill, perhaps things that they love to do that they combine doing for, the whole town.
It's a bi-monthly meeting, Wednesday nights.
They
we
should
get the
come.
packet, come to the meetings or watch the meetings through WestfordCAT.
Come and sit. And
see what it's all about.
So you can see it recorded on WestfordCAT.
Yes.
And as a young parent, it's an evening meeting. So does that require a babysitter for you?
Yes.
Not for me.
So that's an important consideration.
Absolutely. Yep.
And are there any funds for that help you out? No.
I've never heard of
Grandparents. Great.
Yeah. Beth and I are always thinking there should be funds for childcare for people that serve on boards.
Well, for select board, my campaign funding can be used for childcare. So if somebody is looking into an elected position in town, that is also something that is available.
First time I heard that.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, when we meet people who are into conservation, to, point them to this opportunity to serve the town, because both of you were invited by others to join the committee and get involved. And so we should always be thinking of that when we're out talking to people, to develop the next leaders, in our town.
Open space available since I've resigned.
I don't think there's anybody in particular, but sometimes you have people who come to the audience and you see their faces more.
Well, you should explain that you had to resign from ConsCom to be
did,
on the
yes.
select board. And why was that?
It would have just been too much work. The select board meetings are on Tuesdays, and then ConsCom is right after that on Wednesday. So it would just be too much of two packets.
So it's not
for one
required,
meeting.
is it?
No, it's not required that
Okay.
I would step down.
So
But
it's
it
not
was
seen
just
as a
a
conflict.
choice for my family.
I don't know
But I will
anybody who
still
ever did
be-
too. Do you?
I don't.
I don't know anyone.
Not since Bob Jeffries he was select board and planning board, I believe, for a little bit there. I patrol the ponds on my paddleboard. I go around and check out the shoreline to make sure that things aren't happening that should not happen. So I'll still be doing that as my service to the Conservation Commission and walking the trails. I walk the 75 miles of trails pretty regularly.
Well, clearly, I'm sure you did not imagine running for office when you joined ConsCom. So talk about that process of how one led to the other.
So Emily Teller was the catalyst for that. She invited me to a Westford Women's Voices meeting at the museum where they were trying to get more women involved in town politics. And she invited me because I was on the Conservation Commission to share my story, to maybe inspire someone else to run. And I ended up being inspired to run that evening. I went home and thought about it, asked my daughter what she thought about it, and she said, well, what is that exactly? And I explained why I would be running and what I would be doing. And she looked at me and she's like, oh, so you're kind of doing it for me.
Oh,
said,
that's
yeah,
sweet.
Absolutely, I'm doing it for you. And so, yeah, it led me to, hadn't been for Bill Harmon suggesting that I join ConsCom, I don't think I would be on the select board today.
Well, it's clear from both of you that the person-to-person connection has been essential.
Absolutely.
And the people that you serve with have a big effect. And I know Marilyn was your campaign manager, so I think she was the first person you talked to.
After my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. From, serving the town. And congratulations on your win.
Thank you. Beth, what you said about people seeing things in us that we might not see in ourselves and pointing out strengths is very important, and looking forward to seeing.
And I think it's important we do that for other people to continue that legacy and to bring new people into the process and into committees so that we can have, develop those new leaders in our town.
I think there's like 3 generations at this table. You were the generation, Marilyn, that inspired me and my town volunteer work. Then, now my children are all grown and I'm retired from my profession. And here we are. This is so wonderful to see both of you now serving the town in very, very important ways.
Absolutely.
It's just what you hope for when you want to pass the baton, and it's time for that torch to be passed. So is there anything else you want to tell us?
It's a wonderful committee to be on. Everyone on the committee is great. We have a really good time, and I highly recommend joining the Conservation Commission. It's a wonderful committee in town, protecting our natural resources.
Well, I really learned a lot. I didn't know all the wetland requirements and
I didn't either.
That you manage all these developments. I just thought you managed the trails and recommended purchasing land. I didn't know that there's this other piece of development that you manage.
And the laws that protect us when rapid development is taking place, like the Wetlands Protection Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, these are what protect us when properties are being developed. So when you see things being built around our lakes, our streams, we have a lot here in Westford. We're very rich in our water resources.
We have 6 great ponds.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
Learned
us.
so much, and we always do. So good luck in your new position.
Thank you.
And Marilyn, thank you so much for all of your years of service.
I've enjoyed every bit of it.
My goodness, it's so impressive that you've been doing this for so long. We thank you.
Thank you.